talk for a minute? All right, thanks a lot. Okay, so right now I'm going to talk about one movie that I have loved ever since I was a kid. Even though I was only 4 years old when this came out, I still love this movie. It is one of my favorites. So I have decided to do another movie review. I've recently done this. I've done the Star Trek series, Short Circuit One, with an emphasis on its sequel. And the next movie I'm going to do is from 1989. For some reason, old movies have a place in my heart, and this one is no exception. Now, the opening sequence to Look Who's Talking has a great charm in the fact that it has a great way to explain to kids how they got there without the awkwardness of talking about sex. I know this because I used the opening sequence to talk to my then 4-year-old niece about that very thing. It is scientifically accurate and age appropriate, which is great considering the sex negative culture that we're surrounded by. This centers on Kirstie Alley, who plays Molly, a single CPA who is involved in an affair with a married man named Albert, played by George Segal, who has a wife named Beth, who could easily have been a forerunner of Maris from Frasier. She gets pregnant, Molly does, and starts preparing for her baby. It seems that Albert is all ready to be a father again when Molly catches him three-timing her with his interior decorator, and she goes into labor. John Travolta comes in at this point as James, and who gets her. He's the cab driver. After an adventurous maybe 2-minute scene, she arrives at St. Jerome's Hospital and greets her new baby, Mikey, who is voiced by Bruce Willis. Now, after bringing Mikey home, James drops by unannounced and brings her the purse she left and accidentally uses breast milk in his coffee. Now, the plot thickens as Molly receives mail from Vincent Ubriaco, James's grandfather, who was kicked out of a nursing facility, and James found another one, but he needs to establish residency. Guess what? Molly's address will be what he is using to establish residency. Now, in order, as payback for that, Molly says that he must babysit Mikey during Molly's aerobics classes. One night, when Albert comes over demanding to see him, he is turned back by James. James then confronts Molly and says that he's the closest thing to a father that Mikey has, to which Molly replies, "You're a big kid." After terminating his employment, she hires a new person who speaks Spanish alone, and she says when Molly comes up, James comes in to talk to Mikey, and then Molly comes in a few minutes later, and she the Spanish babysitter says, "El señor guapo con el bebé." In other words, there's a handsome gentleman with the baby. So plug for Spanish. So when James talks to Mikey, and Molly hears him over the baby monitor, and that endears him to her a little more. And what ends up happening is, after moving in, James's grandpa, they bond a little more. He takes her flying. He actually, they do A Town Without Pity, a little song, a little dance to that song, and there's a lot of, and actually A Town Without Pity comes before he moves his grandfather into the new nursing home that he's going to be in. So what ends up happening is, after moving James's grandpa, and they bond a little more, and Molly says that she's going to take Mikey to see his father, Albert, not James. Which ends in a disaster when she has to change him, and he's like, "No, that Albert's like, that's a $20,000 desk," and she smushes the diaper on it and says, "Now it's junk." And he says, "Well, I thought you would be a little more understanding. Okay, you were going through a selfish phase. She picks up a stroller, you'll understand that I am going through a destructive phase." And she picks up the stroller, takes this thing, and whacks the statue to pieces, and I love that scene. So what ends up happening is, Molly asks Mikey, she says, "Everybody loves you, Grandpa loves you, Mom loves you, blah, blah, blah loves you, James loves you. Mikey, do you love James?" Now, she gets a call, which Grandpa has been increasingly violent and may get kicked out of the nursing home, but Molly convinces him to stay, convinces them to let him stay. Vincent Ubriaco, played wonderfully by Ava Goda, says, "Of all my grandnieces, or of all my daughters, you're my favorite. You're smart, and you're a good person. That's why Jimmy loves you so much. And that's a little moment of realization. Now, what happens is Mikey is back with Grandpa, and Grandpa gets distracted when one of his friends, Esther, comes along to talk to him. Mikey is he gets in the back. He goes tiptoes around and gets caught in the back of a pickup truck. He puts a little breadstick in the keyhole, which James taught him how to drive earlier in the movie, which is a cute scene. But what ends up happening is they find out that he's in the back of that. He's in a car that's being towed, and they go and get him from that car. And what ends up happening is Mikey says "Dada," and taking the hint, Molly and James get together and have Julie, who's Mikey's little sister, voiced by Joan Rivers at the end of part 1, and in part 2 she is voiced by Roseanne. What I like about this movie is just about everything, especially some of the notable scenes, like the biological clock is ticking. The biological clock is ticking. I love that scene. I don't know why, mainly because it's just one of those things that, I guess maybe it just gives more of a urgency to the situation or whatnot. But what I like about it is simply that it's a very smart written comedy. I love how it's not just your normal run-of-the-mill, down on your luck single mother. This woman is a professional. Casting was beautiful. Casting was wonderful. I could believe that Olympia Dukakis was in fact her mother. Both actresses did a wonderful job, and I love how the moments are real, even though maybe it's a little bit contrived. But Molly is played ably by Kirstie Alley, and I'm pretty sure that when people pitched this, they were thinking, "Oh, a talking baby." They were probably thinking an animated flick, but once they probably got the script, whoever rejected that script must have been kicking themselves later. When Look Who's Talking pretty much became a hit. So everything in this movie is spot on. I could probably remember this in my sleep. But I gotta say that this movie is wonderful just because, I don't know, it's just everything came together. And I actually watched this movie yesterday, and I always enjoy it. It's kid enough, it's adult enough, and it's just one great piece of entertainment. Thanks for letting me talk to you, YouTube.